Hey, so, I was one of those people that for a long time identified as a secular person and understood that maybe I had some sort of cultural heritage that was based more upon what we did together, right? You live in community. You make a statement, profess a statement of faith, of believing, and then you engage with community around making that happen. And at some point, some things changed. I started doing some things. I became a bit more spiritually aware, and wanted to revisit something I had requested to be able to be a part of years before. But in the meantime, other things happened. And I was exposed to religious persecution on a level I had not previously been exposed to. And one of the things that happened that I was not as cognizant of at the time, because I was going through my own process of spiritual maturation, was understanding that somebody I had met at a time in a manner wherein he identified himself as secular, had his own sort of spiritual catharsis, and he ended up becoming a priest, or rather, a pastor. And he went through a period of time where he was trying to, after he finished divinity school, figure out exactly how to affiliate himself personally, but also within a context of his congregation. And I had respected him a great deal from when I had worked with him from before. And even though I had some kind of like misgivings and there were some controversies he had engaged early in life, that when he went through that period, there was a way, I guess you could say, that I had a vantage point that I wouldn't have had without him. I would not have been able to have had my own sort of spiritual catharsis and authenticity in confrontation of spiritual persecution if I had not known him when he was secular doing what he was doing and then had gone through my own process of dealing with what it meant for him to then become a spiritual person and go to divinity school and become a pastor. Now, I knew from early on that there was a conflict in some regards, some might say, based upon where he came from and where I came from, right? He was a person who had grown up in a politically active family in El Salvador. And I'd grown up in the military. My father was in the military. But we met each other at a time when we were committed to certain principles. And in the city of Chicago, we wanted to do the same thing with different communities and from the positions we had at the time. And so as he went through his spiritual catharsis and then I went through my own, we ended up meeting a little bit later in a capacity where, at least initially, we understood we could assist each other. And I found him to not only be a comrade, but also somebody that was one of my spiritual mentors. And as a matter of fact, I developed a very significant fraternal love that was completely devoid of any sort of carnality. And it was something that I have always understood to be very sacred, even if I don't agree with him, and even if he is wrestling with very, very significant demons sometimes, which he does, he has to. That's part of what his calling is. I still respect him a great deal. It came to my attention at some point in time, after he and I were separated physically, that I ended up encountering another context from where he came from. And see, he came from a specific kind of environment. And later, I was in a situation where people who were in opposition to him and his family, and were part of what compelled him to have to leave under the circumstances he did. And I ended up being in community. And now we're dealing with the results. My understanding is that at the onset, a great deal of the financing that went into the development of Bain Capital came from people that, for whatever reason, left El Salvador during the Civil War and had substantial holdings that they were seeking to invest. They somehow found that they had some alliance that was present in the onset of the operations of Bain Capital. It's one of these things we're dealing with now. You might have substantial shareholders in your corporate hierarchy, people with vested interest. Just because you have a genetic connection, or you might share some security documents issued by the same municipalities or political subdivisions, doesn't mean they're your fucking assets. Especially if they have to flee the country because of religious persecution. See, we met in Chicago, which is in the state of Illinois. You should have understood the implications of trying to hound my ass to California and hound my ass to Honduras and then follow me down to Texas. I'm trying to compose myself. These are very, very strong passions that are elicited. We could have had a very, very different arrangement up until this time. But time and time again, a good faith effort is met with the most grotesque form of virulent, mercenary anti Semitism. And the problem is, there are enough people affiliated with your networks that should actually literally be qualified to deal with the kinds of materials and the kinds of interest you claim to want to have a financial responsibility for. But there's something lacking when it comes to following through on the ethical requirements associated with thinking you're entitled to those kinds of investments. Are we understanding each other? When I was in Honduras, I had some gold with me. It was the only gold I've ever owned. It was given to me by somebody else. Despite everything else that happened in my life, I was able to keep that until I went there. Somebody saw it. Somebody thought that they had a bigger claim to it than I did. But the thing is, it wasn't their gold. We're talking about something very similar. Just because you share a security document from the same political subdivision somebody else doesn't mean they're your property. It wasn't your gold. Do you understand? And if there was a call, shall we say, if somebody said, I gave you some gold of mine to hold, we need it back. You were not included in that we. You stole it from me, and you stole it from them. And we're dealing with the ramifications to this day. Now, maybe you think that God divinely appointed you to steal it, that God sanctioned you to steal it, and then to claim that for whatever reason you're more justified. Well, I mean, it had to go through the circuitous route. You were just a pass-through for us to get it. Sound familiar? That's not the way it works. Because you didn't stop. You followed me. And your God told me exactly what standard he's holding you to, and you're not meeting it. Do you understand? You say you believe in these things. You believe in these realms. You believe in these eons. Why do you keep underestimating what your God has provided you with? I will not be going on site again. This is my last attempt to communicate these very profound matters with you. See, you stole real gold from me. And then you gave me fake gold in an effort to try to swindle me into a commitment I am not bound to. And in the course of that, you have revealed a perniciousness that is very substantial. And the problem is you keep following me, trying to take my gold. Now I have real gold from where I come from my people. And you want to steal it too. And because you got away with it, then you think that you're entitled to keep getting away with it. You keep making the wrong decisions. You keep making the wrong alliances. Something's happened. There's been some sort of watershed. There's some sort of transition. You took everything I had. It wasn't enough. You can't take any more. What I have now is off limits. Do not follow me again. Would you consider what you tried to investiture yesterday to be gold? Is it silver? How many pieces? It's no longer available. We've got a deadline coming up. August 20th, 2021. If you do not respond appropriately before the 21st, you are going to have to deal with the implications. You were the one that told me to read your book. You were the one that told me to read it. And God let me see what he wanted me to see.